It was a cold, wet Tuesday. The city felt gray and miserable, and the rain was making the streets slippery. In the middle of this mess there was a woman named Lila. "Hey there and welcome back. I'm so happy you're here. Grab that blanket, maybe pour yourself a hot drink and get really comfortable because today we're settling in for a story you won't forget. Before we dive any deeper though, let me know how you're doing. Drop a quick comment and tell me what part of the world you're watching from today. And if you want to stay with us through all the twists and turns ahead, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a moment. Alright, let's get back to it. Lila was a fighter, but she was tired. If you looked closely at her, you wouldn't see weakness, you'd just see a constant low-level worry in her eyes. She wore clothes that didn't draw attention, just the kind of sneakers you could sprint in. Lila wasn't walking, she was running for her life. Her problem was a man named Marcus. Marcus was her ex-husband and he was dangerous. He looked sharp in his expensive coat, but his face was set in a terrible cold rage. He was the shadow that wouldn't leave. Lila saw a huge tower, a big bank building with glass doors. It was her only chance. She rushed inside through the spinning doors and hit the marble lobby floor running. She spotted the elevators. Car 4 was just closing. Lila didn't think, she just threw herself at the door, jamming her arm into the gap. The doors hissed and opened wide. She scrambled inside, breathless, and punched the button for the 60th floor. Up, up, up. She closed her eyes, trying to block out the sound of her own hammering heart. The doors sealed. The car started its climb. She was safe. For 1 second. Then she opened her eyes. She wasn't alone. Standing in the back, totally calm, was Elias. Elias was simply imposing. He was tall and solid, wearing a perfect dark suit. He looked like he owned the entire building. The scariest thing about him was his stillness. Lila had burst in like an explosion and he hadn't even twitched. His eyes were dark and intense. They looked at her not with curiosity but with total knowledge. "Sorry about that," Lila mumbled, trying to pull herself together. "Just trying to shake someone off." Elias gave her a tiny, slow nod. Nothing more. As the elevator passed the 30th floor, Lila felt that strange, cold fear return. "There was a guy," she whispered, looking back at the closed doors. "My ex. Did he try to follow me?" Elias reached into his jacket. He pulled out a clean white handkerchief. He bent slightly and wiped a single tiny drop of moisture from his shoe. The movement was slow and controlled. "He tried to follow you," Elias said, his voice smooth and low. "And did he miss the elevator?" Lila asked, desperate for a simple answer. Elias put the cloth away. He looked right at her. "He stopped." Lila frowned. "Marcus doesn't stop. Ever. He must have given up." The elevator was almost at the top. "Lila," Elias said, using her name, which he should not know. "He didn't stop because he quit. He was made to stop." The truth hit her hard. She hadn't outrun Marcus. Someone had cleared the path for her. And that someone was standing right next to her, cool and controlled, hundreds of feet above the street. "Who are you?" Lila demanded, the old panic giving way to a new, sharper fear. Elias watched the floor indicator click onto the 60th floor. The elevator chimed and the doors opened onto a wealthy, silent, empty hallway. Elias stepped out. He paused, looking back at Lila, who was frozen by the doors. "You are safe from him now," he said. "The running is finished. Now you walk with me." He turned and moved down the hall. Lila knew she should run away. But the absolute authority in his voice was overwhelming. She stepped out of the car, her sneakers quiet on the thick carpet. She was safe from Marcus, but she had walked straight into a new and unknown world. The plot thickened the second Lila stepped off that elevator. She was no longer running from a simple domestic threat. She was walking into a world where problems were solved with silence, not shouting. Elias led the way down the hushed, expensive hallway on the 60th floor. He moved without hurry, his presence making the air feel heavy. Lila hurried to keep up, her comfortable sneakers squeaking slightly on the thick carpet, a sound that felt ridiculously loud in the silence. Elias stopped in front of a heavy dark wood door that had no visible handle, just a smooth, polished surface. He didn't knock. He simply pressed his thumb against a small, almost invisible panel beside the frame. There was a faint click, and the door swung inward silently, revealing an office that was less of a workplace and more of a throne room. The office was huge, with walls of glass offering a breathtaking, terrifying view of the city sprawling below. Everything in the room was black, gray, and minimalist. A large, imposing desk, a few low leather chairs, and absolutely nothing personal. It looked like the office of someone who didn't plan on staying long, or someone who didn't want anyone to know they were ever there. Two other men were already inside, standing near the window, talking in low, intense tones. When the door opened, they immediately stopped and turned. One was Silas. Silas was younger than Elias, maybe late 20s, and dressed in a suit that was even sharper and tighter. He had cold, blue eyes and a face that looked like it was perpetually annoyed. He had the rigid posture of a soldier who was used to following orders without question. When his eyes landed on Lila, they didn't show curiosity. They showed pure, quiet alarm. The other man was Caleb. Caleb was older, maybe Elias's age, with a slight build and tired, intelligent eyes. He wore glasses perched low on his nose and had the look of a university professor, someone who preferred books to violence. But the moment he saw Lila, a flicker of profound worry crossed his face, a look that said, "This is a terrible mistake." Elias walked past them both without a word. He went straight to the large desk and rested his hands on the polished surface, looking out at the city. "This is Lila," Elias announced, his voice carrying easily across the large room. He didn't offer a smile or any pleasantries. Silas gave a sharp, almost hostile nod, keeping his distance. Caleb, however, slowly pushed his glasses up his nose, studying Lila with an unnerving intensity. He didn't look at her like she was a threat, but like she was a ghost. Lila felt extremely vulnerable. "Look," she started, pulling her jacket tighter, "I appreciate what happened down there, but if I could just know who you are and why I'm here." Elias cut her off, his voice calm but with an iron edge. "You're here because you were running into traffic. You were running from a problem that would have killed you eventually, and the traffic wouldn't have cared." "But who are you?" she repeated, looking from Elias to the two silent, watching men. "Are you police? Security?" Silas actually let out a small, quiet, humorless laugh under his breath. Elias turned from the window, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "My name is Elias Thorne. I offer you protection. No conditions other than your full cooperation." Lila felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "Protection from Marcus?" "Marcus is taken care of," Elias said simply. "You are protected from what Marcus represents. He was sloppy. He was loud. The people he answers to are neither." Caleb finally spoke, his voice a low, educated murmur. "Elias, with all due respect, we have rules. Bringing her here, this is a violation of the structure." Silas nodded sharply in agreement, his posture tightening further. "The rules are there for a reason, sir. They protect us. This is reckless." Lila looked back and forth between the two men reacting with quiet panic and the man offering her safety with chilling calm. This wasn't a corporate security team. This felt heavy, old, and dangerous. Elias didn't even look at Caleb or Silas. He looked only at Lila. "They worry because my circle is usually very small. Very closed. Bringing you in disturbs a long-held quiet." "What quiet?" Lila asked. "What is this place? I just ran from my ex-husband. I didn't run into whatever this is." "This is a solution," Elias said. "You will stay here. You will be safe. You will not leave this floor without a guard. We will handle the rest." "Handle what?" Lila shot back. "I don't need you to handle anything. I just need to go home, pack my things, and disappear again. I'm good at that." "No, you aren't," Silas interjected sharply. "You were found in 3 weeks. You were cornered in a lobby. You're terrible at disappearing." Lila ignored Silas and focused on Elias. "Look, I'm from Jamaica. I have family in Toronto. I have friends in New York. I can go anywhere. Just give me a clear path." Elias leaned forward slightly on the desk, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You don't understand. Your disappearance wasn't the issue. Your existence is. Marcus wasn't chasing you for custody or money. He was chasing you for a mistake he made that led back to us. This was the first true piece of terrifying information. A mistake he made. What mistake?" "I don't know anything about you or him being involved in anything big." Elias looked at Caleb. Caleb looked back, his face drawn. "Caleb, explain the structure," Elias instructed. Caleb sighed, adjusting his glasses. He looked less like a professor now and more like a reluctant lawyer. "Lila," Caleb began, using a softer tone than Elias. Elias is the head of a syndicate. We move things, assets, information, money. Quietly. We are a structure of protection and control. Marcus, your ex, was once part of a lower circle, a driver and an informant. He knew things about a specific event from several years ago. A very serious crime. Lila just stared, her mouth slightly open. A syndicate? Like the Mafia? Silas rolled his eyes. Don't say the word. It's crude. Elias waved a dismissive hand at Silas. Yes, like that. And Marcus ran, taking information, money, and most importantly, making a claim on something that wasn't his. And what claim was that? Lila asked, her voice tight. Elias walked around the desk, finally moving closer to her. He claimed you were his link to the people he ran from. He claimed you were part of his old life, that you knew too much. Lila shook her head quickly. That's crazy. We were divorced before he ever started hanging out with those shady friends of his. I don't know anything about his life. I haven't spoken to him in months, except to tell him to stay away. It doesn't matter what you know, Caleb explained sadly. It matters what they think you know. And now that Elias has intervened and taken you, they know you are important. They know Elias has you. And that's the rule we're talking about, Silas muttered, crossing his arms. The one Elias just broke. What rule? Lila pressed. Elias looked at his two lieutenants, then back at Lila. Years ago there was a burial. A crime. A big one. It nearly fractured the entire structure. The rule we made then was simple. Nothing related to the burial ever comes back into the fold. Nothing. No witnesses, no family, no loose ends. Lila realized the cold fear she was feeling was justified. And you think I'm connected to this burial? You are connected to Marcus, who was connected to it, Elias said, his dark eyes unwavering. And when I saved you in that elevator, I took that connection and brought it right into the heart of my operation. I violated the oldest, most important rule just to save you. Why? Lila asked, the word trembling slightly. Why would you risk everything for a stranger? Elias just watched her, silent for a long moment. He didn't offer a romantic explanation or a dramatic monologue. He just offered a cold promise. Because if I hadn't saved you, your death would have pointed a spotlight right back at my organization, and that is a far greater risk than breaking a rule, Lila. Now, you will tell me everything you know about Marcus's last few months. Lila was shaking, but the clarity of the situation was settling over her. She was a pawn, an accidental witness pulled from the street into a massive secret world. Her safety wasn't about love or justice. It was about protecting Elias's business. But she was safe. And though her life was terrifyingly complicated now, she wasn't alone anymore. She was under the umbrella of a ruthless, powerful protection. She took a deep breath, the expensive filtered air of the 60th floor burning in her lungs. She looked at Elias, the imposing man who broke his own rules to keep her alive. My cooperation is yours, she said, her voice steady now, the fighter coming back to life. But I need to know one thing. If they find me, will you give me up? Elias looked at Caleb, who looked worried. He looked at Silas, who looked angry. Then he looked at Lila, and a faint, almost invisible hint of respect crossed his features. I don't give up what I take, Lila, Elias promised. I offer you a dangerous safety, but it is real. You are protected now. Lila had traded the fear of being chased for the fear of being trapped. After that intense first night on the 60th floor, she was given a room, less a guest suite and more a luxurious prison cell. It was silent, sterile, and always guarded by one of Elias's quiet, watchful men. She had nothing to do but talk, and talk she did. Over the next few days, sitting in that high-up office, Lila told Elias everything about Marcus. Not about the syndicate stuff, she didn't know any of that, but about their life together. She described their ordinary life in a small house near the suburbs of a city like Atlanta, or perhaps a commuter town outside London. She talked about how Marcus changed. He started out as a nice guy, maybe a bit insecure, working a normal sales job. But slowly he started getting cold calls, taking meetings in strange places, and coming home with expensive watches he couldn't afford. He got quieter, meaner, and suddenly their marriage was over. Elias, Caleb, and sometimes Silas listened to every detail. Elias sat behind his desk just watching her, absorbing the information. Caleb took notes, his brow furrowed in concentration. Silas usually just stood by the door, radiating mistrust. One evening, after Lila had finished recounting the timeline of their final, messy divorce, Elias finally spoke, his gaze fixed on her. You said he disappeared for a week right before the final papers were signed, Elias recalled. Where did he go? Lila shook her head, running a hand through her hair. I don't know. He just vanished. Said he was on a business trip, but he sounded terrified on the phone. When he came back he was a wreck. He was packing only essentials, checking the windows all the time. He kept muttering about proof and insurance. Proof of what? Caleb asked, leaning forward, his glasses slipping down his nose. I don't know. Lila insisted, frustrated. He was paranoid. He kept saying, they'll never catch me if they can't find the names. He kept clutching this old beat-up USB stick, the kind you get for free at a conference. He said it was his key to staying alive. Elias's stillness broke. His eyes went sharp, almost predatory. A USB stick. Did you see it again? No, Lila said. He left and I didn't see him again until he started showing up near my job, chasing me. I figured he'd lost it or they'd taken it. Caleb and Elias exchanged a look that Lila understood immediately. This USB stick was the information Marcus had stolen. The proof that tied him back to the syndicate and the buried crime from years ago. The past refuses to stay buried, Elias murmured, repeating the rule that Silas had warned him about. Marcus tried to use this information to leverage his safety, but instead he led us right to you. Just as they were discussing the missing proof, the large office door clicked open and Silas strode in, looking more agitated than usual. Sir, Silas said, addressing Elias. We have a problem. A contact reached out from the old network. They found a message. A message from Marcus? Elias asked, his voice flat. Yes, but it's not a message to us, Silas explained, stepping closer to the desk. It's a warning directed at a middleman in New Jersey who handles some of our logistics. The message was simple. She knows what's on the drive. Bring her out or the file drops. Lila felt a rush of icy shock. She knows? I don't know anything. Marcus is using you as a threat, Caleb realized, tapping his pen on his notepad. He is confirming to the network that the asset is active and ready to be deployed. He's trying to force their hand and save his own life. He's leveraging her against the entire organization, Elias agreed. He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. He's telling them, I know who you are, I have the proof, and the witness has a finger on the button. And now they believe I actually know something. Lila cried, jumping out of her chair. This is worse than before. I'm trapped between you and them and I'm innocent. Innocence is irrelevant, Elias said without emotion. Marcus is trying to save himself by throwing you to the wolves. But by doing this he confirms that he is alive and that the information he holds is still dangerous to us. Silas spoke, his voice full of anger. Sir, we have to deal with Marcus first. He's outside our territory but he's causing too much trouble. Let me send a team. No, Elias cut him off immediately. If we move on Marcus directly he'll be spooked and he will release the information. We need the drive and we need him quiet. We need to find the channel he's using to communicate. Caleb looked at Lila. The threat was sent through an old syndicate channel. This confirms that Marcus hasn't just gone rogue. He's trying to operate inside the perimeter. He used to be an errand boy, but he knows too many weak spots. Lila paced the room, rubbing her arms. So he's using me as bait to protect himself and you're keeping me safe because if they take me they might stop him. This is insane. It's business, Elias corrected her gently. Marcus wasn't just working for the syndicate, Lila. He was working inside it in a low-level capacity for years before you ever knew. He ran errands for one of the old guard. A man named Petrov. Caleb winced at the name. Petrov was a key financial architect of the structure before Elias took over. He was messy. He was directly linked to the burial. Lila stopped pacing. Wait, you said Marcus was connected to this burial thing. What is the burial? Elias looked like he had reached the end of his patience. The burial is a metaphor, Lila. It's the event 5 years ago where certain people in very powerful positions including corrupt politicians and dirty bank officials, were removed from their lives and operations forever. They disappeared. Their names were erased from sealed court documents. And the whole thing was made to look like a grand, complicated accident. And Marcus was part of that cleanup crew? Lila asked, feeling a cold dread wash over her. Yes, Elias confirmed. He drove cars. He filed paperwork. He knew where the bodies were buried, literally and figuratively. And he walked away with information that could destroy not just my business, but several major figures in government and finance across 3 continents. That is why they are hunting him and by extension you. A feeling of absolute helplessness washed over Lila. She sat heavily in the nearest leather chair. Her life had been small: bills, work, bad marriage, divorce. Now she was a key player in an international crime story. What am I supposed to do? She whispered. Elias walked over and stopped in front of her. He didn't offer comfort, just focus. You will tell us every single person Marcus ever spoke to, every friend he made in the last year of your marriage, every place he visited in Canada or the UK or the US. Anything he said about money. Anything about an apartment or a locker. Anything at all. Marcus is using his knowledge to survive, and he has dragged you back into his mess. The only way you leave this office alive is by helping us catch him and secure that drive. Lila took a steadying breath. She looked out the window at the distant city lights. She felt the weight of the entire syndicate pressing down on her, and the awful, desperate betrayal of her ex-husband. He hadn't just left her, he had set her up to be killed. But looking at Elias, calm, powerful, and now completely invested in keeping her alive, she found a strange resolve. She wasn't a victim anymore, she was a resource. And resources are protected fiercely. Lila looked up at Elias. Fine, she said, her voice clear. He had a cousin in Jamaica, a guy he used to send money to. I have an old address. Let's start there. Elias nodded once, a hint of approval in his dark eyes. He didn't offer a dramatic speech, just a plan. Lila's life had become a dizzying cycle of silence and stress. The 60th floor was quiet, but her mind was loud. The information she gave Elias about Marcus's cousin in Jamaica proved to be a dead end. Marcus had been careful. Days bled into a week, spent poring over old bank statements and trying to remember every throwaway comment her ex-husband had made. The frustration was boiling over, mostly for Silas, who still looked at Lila like she was a ticking bomb. But Elias remained patiently focused. One morning, Caleb walked into the room carrying a faded, thick legal file tied up with old ribbon. He looked even more stressed than usual, his face pale beneath his reading glasses. We ran a deep dive into the old structure's periphery, Caleb explained to Elias, who was standing by the window. We were looking for anyone who might have helped Marcus hide the drive. Instead, we found something else, something related to the original burial case. Elias turned, his expression darkening immediately. Be precise, Caleb. This is a closed topic. It's closed, yes, but the sealed documents mention a witness, Caleb whispered, glancing nervously at Lila. A low-level confidential informant who testified 5 years ago and received a life-changing amount of compensation to disappear permanently. Lila, who was drinking a cup of coffee Elias's staff provided, suddenly felt a cold chill run down her spine. A confidential informant? What does that have to do with me? Caleb approached her slowly, holding the file like it was radioactive. The witness was given a new identity, a new life, and was settled into a quiet North American city. The funds for this new life were routed through the same shadow accounts Marcus was later using. The money that rebuilt the witness's life came from the network now hunting Marcus, Elias summarized, his voice flat. That means the syndicate paid for their own witness to disappear. Exactly, Caleb confirmed. They needed the testimony to finalize the burial, to make the disappearances look legally legitimate. Then they paid the witness to vanish. It was a clean slate. Lila set her coffee down, her hands shaking slightly. This is interesting history, but I need to focus on Marcus. Why are you telling me this? Caleb looked at Elias, who gave a nearly invisible nod. Caleb took a deep breath. Lila, Caleb said gently. The witness's new name, the name on the sealed identity transfer documents. It was an alias. But the description, the date of birth, the basic physical details of the informant before the identity was finalized. He paused, looking directly at her familiar brown eyes. They match you. Lila stared at him. She felt the blood rush from her head. No, that's impossible. I've always been Lila. I worked in retail, then I worked administration. I went to college. I met Marcus. I didn't testify against anyone. I don't know anything about a burial. The records indicate that the entire testimony was given while the informant was under heavy sedation and trauma, Caleb explained, his voice full of pity. It's possible, even likely, that the memory of the event was suppressed. The money that paid for the house you bought before you married Marcus, the money that allowed you to reset your life after your divorce. It wasn't severance or inheritance. It was compensation. Lila felt her world tilting. She remembered getting a large, unexpected wire transfer years ago, right after a period of intense stress and illness she couldn't quite place. She had always told people it was from an obscure relative who died overseas, a story Marcus had helped her create. Marcus helped her create the story. Marcus, Lila whispered, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. He didn't just meet me. He found me. He found the witness the syndicate paid to disappear. Elias stepped forward, his dark eyes like chips of stone. Marcus was working cleanup for Petrov at the time of the burial. He would have seen the internal files, the compensation files. He found you because he knew exactly who you were and where you were supposed to be. He didn't love me, Lila realized, tears welling up, but she blinked them back, refusing to cry in front of these men. He married me because he saw me as a ticket. He saw me as a protected asset. He saw you as leverage, Elias corrected grimly. When Marcus ran, he didn't just steal the drive. He started chasing you because he needed to activate the forgotten witness. He needed the syndicate to think. The witness is active. We must stop her before she remembers and talks again. Silas, who had been listening by the door, finally broke his silence, his voice tight with anger. This confirms my original point, Elias. She's the buried past. You broke the rule for the very reason the rule exists. We have to make a choice. The choice is already made, Elias said firmly, looking only at Lila. If we release her, they find her, and if they find her, she is tortured until they realize she genuinely doesn't remember. Then they kill her and the drive is still out there loose. If we keep her, we control the narrative. Lila looked down at her hands, which were still trembling. The whole narrative of her life, her recovery, her home, her quiet career, had been a beautifully funded lie, paid for by the very network now trying to kill her ex-husband. She wasn't an ordinary woman. She was a ghost, a loose end the syndicate had already paid to bury once. What did I testify about? Lila asked, her voice raspy. I need to know. If I have to remember, I need to know what I'm looking for. Caleb flipped open the file and read from a heavily redacted section. The informant gave details about a series of shell companies and illegal transfers linked to a high-ranking government official, the kind of corruption that would bring down a whole wing of the administration. The testimony confirmed the paper trail for the burial to look like a legal investigation gone cold. You confirmed the method but not the names. Lila took a deep breath. A sudden memory flashed, not a major event but a feeling. A sterile room, the smell of disinfectant, and a sense of talking for hours trying to piece together numbers and dates. Then a long, dark silence. I remember the numbers, she whispered, shaking her head. I remember the numbers, but I don't remember the person. Just the awful, cold feeling of knowing something terrible. The numbers are enough for now, Elias said, a flicker of something close to excitement in his eyes. Marcus stole the drive to hold us hostage. Now we use you, the buried witness, to hold him hostage. If he tries to release the drive, we leak the fact that the witness is still alive and about to talk. He won't risk us exposing him that way. Lila stood up, feeling a new kind of resolve harden her gaze. She was a witness. She was leverage. She was a lie paid for by criminals. The running was over. The hiding was over. She was exactly where she was meant to be, at the heart of the structure that created her false life. She looked at Elias. I need to see the documents, she demanded. If I'm going to be your leverage, I need to understand what I saw. Elias looked at her, his initial cold assessment finally shifting into respect. She wasn't crying, she was asking for the weapon. Caleb, Elias commanded. Prepare a secure tablet. Everything we have on the shell companies. Lila, welcome back to the world you forgot. Lila looked at the stack of old, forgotten files. Her life had been a lie, but that lie had been a gift of survival. Now she would use the truth hidden within that lie to save herself. She was ready to remember. The hope she felt now was not about being rescued, but about having the strength to fight back using the truth that was buried inside her. Hope was remembering. Lila spent the next 48 hours submerged in documents. Elias and Caleb had given her a secure tablet loaded with redacted legal transcripts, financial ledgers and coded communication logs from 5 years prior. It was tedious, overwhelming reading, but it was her life. She learned that the huge payment that funded her new life was a hush fund, meant to ensure the witness, her former self, would never resurface. The money trail was shockingly complex, moving through banks in places like the Cayman Islands and Switzerland before settling into a simple account in her name. The entire setup was designed to make the official record look like the burial. The mass removal of corrupt officials was a legitimate, if massive, investigation. She also learned about Elias's structure. It was cold, efficient, and global. Elias wasn't a gangster. He was a CEO who dealt in influence and protection, and he was absolutely ruthless about keeping his organization invisible. His team was small, tightly knit, and intensely loyal. At least that's what Elias believed. One sunny morning, the kind of day that made the glass office sparkle, Lila was alone with Elias. Caleb was out tracking the origins of Marcus's recent communications, and Silas was downstairs managing building security. Lila looked up from the tablet. "I understand what I saw now," she said quietly. "It wasn't a person. It was a pattern. The way certain numbers were moved from shell company A to shell company B. It was so specific I was able to confirm the method, even if I don't remember the names of the people who were making the moves." Elias nodded, approving the clarity. "That is precisely what the syndicate paid for. They needed the method confirmed to lock down the case. But something is bothering me," Lila continued, her brow furrowed. "This transfer right here." She pointed to a line item on the screen. "It's the largest single transfer in the whole file. It's dated 2 days after the sealed testimony. The official record says it was a final compensation payment for the witness. Me. But look at the routing code." Elias leaned closer, his dark eyes scanning the complex string of numbers. Lila tapped the screen. "This code, it's not a standard disbursement channel. It's an internal code. And look at the amount. It's almost 3 times what the original compensation package was. I didn't get that money, Elias. That account was empty when I opened my new life account." Elias froze, his body going completely still. This was not the silence of calm. It was the silence before an earthquake. Someone faked the disbursement, Elias realized, his voice dangerously low. Someone diverted the majority of the final payment. They used the official witness compensation file as a cover to steal a massive amount of funds and route it internally. And they used an internal routing code, Lila pressed. Someone close to the heart of the structure did this. Someone who knew the code, the cover story, and the timing of the sealed case. Elias straightened up slowly, his face like stone. The realization hung in the air. The true enemy wasn't Marcus, who stole a digital file. The true enemy was the man who stole millions and used the most sensitive organizational secret, the witness identity, to cover his tracks. "Silas," Elias said, almost a breath. Lila looked at him, confused. "Silas? Your right-hand man? The one who looks like he'd take a bullet for you?" Silas was the only person besides Caleb and me with full access to the final financial disbursement codes that day, Elias explained, a vein pulsing slightly in his temple. He was the one assigned to make the burial files disappear entirely. A sharp, metallic ping suddenly broke the silence. It came from the outer office, the area where Elias's personal assistants worked. Lila and Elias looked up at the main office door just as it burst open. It wasn't a guard or an assistant. It was Silas. Silas was charging across the office floor, his face twisted into a mask of pure, desperate rage. In his hand he held a silenced pistol leveled straight at Lila. "You should have left her on the street." Silas screamed, the calm composure he usually wore completely gone. "She was supposed to be gone. You never learn, Elias. I worked too hard for this. The timing was too perfect." Silas had been downstairs managing security, supposedly. He must have been listening. The moment they connected the final payment theft to an internal code, he knew he was exposed. Elias reacted instantly, lunging across the desk and knocking Lila violently to the side and down onto the thick carpet. The single shot from Silas's silenced pistol cracked through the high-rise office. It struck the glass wall behind the desk with a deafening smash, shattering a complex spiderweb pattern into the tempered glass but not piercing it entirely. The sound of the shot was immediately followed by the frantic beeping of the security system going haywire. "The money, Silas?" Elias yelled, rolling and sheltering Lila's head with his body, his eyes fixed on his panicked lieutenant. "Was it always about the money?" Silas ignored him, his eyes still fixed on Lila, the witness who had accidentally uncovered his 5-year-old crime. He took another step forward, aiming for a cleaner shot. "It was never about the drive, Elias. It was about her," Silas yelled, his voice cracking with emotion. "Marcus didn't steal the drive. I gave it to him. I paid Marcus to activate the witness. I told him to chase her down in the street. I knew you'd jump in. I knew you'd break the rule and bring her right here. I knew you'd trust me to clean up the problem." Lila realized the shocking truth. The entire chase, the elevator rescue, the whole stressful week. It was all a brilliantly crafted plan by Silas. He had manufactured a crisis, betting on Elias's protective nature, just so he could be the one trusted to get close to the problem and finally kill the witness who held the key to his past theft. Before Silas could take the second shot, the massive dark wood door burst open again. Caleb stood there, his face pale with alarm. He had clearly heard the shot or the security alarms. He saw Silas, gun in hand, aimed at Elias and Lila. "Silas! What are you doing?" Caleb yelled, his voice breaking. Silas, momentarily distracted, swung his head towards Caleb. "Stay out of it, Caleb. This is the burial. This is what we buried." That small moment of distraction was all Elias needed. With a terrifying surge of speed, Elias threw a heavy obsidian paperweight, the only item on his pristine desk, straight at Silas's head. The rock caught Silas hard just above the ear. Silas staggered, dropping the silenced gun with a clatter onto the marble floor. Elias scrambled up, pushing Lila behind the desk for cover. Silas tried to raise his hands, clutching his head, his face a mask of shock and pain. Caleb, realizing the gravity of the betrayal, rushed forward. He was never a fighter, but he lunged, kicking the dropped gun away and pinning the injured Silas against the wall. Elias stood over them, breathing hard, his custom suit ripped slightly at the shoulder, but his control was back. He looked at Silas, not with anger but with a deep, cold sorrow. "You built the problem and then offered to solve it," Elias said, his voice flat. 5 years of loyalty just to kill the witness who could expose a theft. Lila, still shaking behind the desk, felt the overwhelming weight of the last hour lift. She hadn't been the intended target of Marcus's drive. She was the intended victim of Silas's 5-year-old fear. The enemy wasn't out there. He was standing right there, one of the 2 men Elias trusted the most. The assassination attempt failed, not because of a grand escape, but because Elias's most loyal lieutenant, the monster who was always seated beside him, was betrayed by a single financial record. Lila looked up at Elias. He had protected her not just out of self-interest, but with a sudden, instinctual sacrifice. He had chosen her, the outsider, the witness, over the man who had been his second-in-command for years. The shock of the betrayal left a physical wound in the office, visible in the shattered glass wall and the lingering smell of gunpowder. Elias had moved fast. Silas was secured immediately, taken to a deep, silent part of the building. Caleb, shaking but resolute, managed the immediate aftermath, handling the security reports and the cleanup. The attempted assassination wasn't just a threat. It was proof that Lila was much more important than she or Elias had initially realized. She wasn't just a witness to corruption. She was the key to a massive internal theft that Silas had committed years ago. Later that evening, the office was clean, the broken glass discreetly replaced with temporary paneling. Lila sat across from Elias and Caleb, the atmosphere heavy with the weight of shattered trust. "Silas's story confirms everything," Elias said, his voice flat with exhaustion and cold rage. "He didn't just steal the money, he knew the protocol. He knew the rules we set up after the burial 5 years ago." Caleb nodded, pushing his glasses up. The protocol was simple. The witness gets a new identity and full compensation. Then they disappear forever. If that witness ever reappears, they are considered a major risk to the entire structure. Not just to Elias but to everyone who helped bury the old corruption. Lila finally understood the full horror of her situation. So, my reappearance, me running into that elevator, was never supposed to happen. It activated a hidden protocol designed to erase me. Exactly, Elias confirmed, leaning forward. That protocol was known only to 3 people: me, Caleb, and Silas. And Silas was in charge of executing the final cleanup. When Marcus started chasing you, Silas saw his chance. He realized the witness, the loose end he was supposed to kill 5 years ago, was back on the board, Lila realized, rubbing her temples. But if he killed me himself, it would look suspicious, like he was cleaning up his own mess. So he convinced Marcus to act as a distraction. He didn't just convince Marcus, he controlled him, Caleb corrected. Marcus was Petrov's driver, a low-level guy. Silas used the stolen money to pay Marcus, giving him the drive and telling him to activate you by chasing you in public. Silas's final plan was to get Elias to intervene, bring you into the building for protection, and then once you were secure, Silas would have a clear, sanctioned shot to neutralize the threat and secure the stolen drive. He was going to kill me, secure the drive I don't even have, and close the file on his 5-year-old theft, all while looking like the loyal lieutenant saving me from a rogue ex-husband, Lila summarized, the chilling clarity of it making her shiver. Elias looked genuinely pained. Silas's theft and his subsequent attempt to murder you was a direct consequence of the original sin of this syndicate. The original sin? Lila questioned. It wasn't the corruption itself, Elias explained. The original sin was trusting the wrong person to handle the cleanup. We trusted Silas to finalize the burial, and he used that trust to steal the witness compensation funds and cover his tracks by eliminating the witness. You on paper. Lila felt a rush of cold realization. So the truth is, I was never meant to survive the day after my testimony. The compensation was fake. The money that funded my new life, that story I told myself, was just a tiny sliver of the money Silas stole. The rest of the compensation, the bulk of it, was diverted by Silas and used to build his own secret network. Caleb pulled out a new file, placing it gently on the desk. When Silas thought you were back and remembering things, the sheer panic of exposure pushed him to act. The drive, Marcus, the chase, it was all a drama created to justify your final, permanent elimination. But I didn't remember anything until I started reading your files, Lila pointed out. If I had run, if I had escaped Elias in the elevator, I would have walked away safe and forgetting everything. He only risked me remembering by forcing me here. That's the flaw in Silas's logic, Elias observed, a cruel sort of admiration in his voice. He was so confident in his ability to control the situation that he overplayed his hand. He assumed a protected asset was an easier target than a loose thread. Lila stood up, walking toward the intact side of the glass wall, looking out at the glittering lights of the city she had fled and returned to. She was a ghost who had been paid to stay buried, and her reappearance was a death sentence. So what happens now to Silas? She asked without turning around. The answer came from Elias, heavy and cold. He violated the trust of the inner circle and, more importantly, he violated the rules protecting the structure. He compromised security for personal gain. His removal will be complete. Lila finally turned back, looking at the 2 remaining men. And Marcus? He's still out there with the drive, still thinking he's calling the shots, still thinking I'm leverage. Marcus is now a loose end on Silas's failed plan, Caleb said. He needs to be silenced before he releases the drive, thinking he's avenging Silas. Marcus is still dangerous because he's stupid. Elias looked at Lila with renewed focus. You are no longer leverage, Lila. You are essential. You are the key witness to Silas's theft, the original sin, and the only person who can help us locate Marcus before he releases that file. He walked toward her, stopping close. We need to go to ground immediately. The syndicate will be in chaos when they realize Silas is gone. We need to find Marcus before anyone else figures out that Silas was the true architect of the crisis. Lila took a deep breath. She wasn't an accidental tourist in this war anymore. She was the central figure. Her existence was the truth that Silas tried to kill. Her mind, once wiped clean by the syndicate's money, was now the biggest threat to those who remained. She looked at Elias, then at Caleb, who gave her a small, paternal nod. The immediate fear of death had faded, replaced by a steely determination. She had been living a lie for 5 years, but now she was ready to fight for the truth. Where do we go? Lila asked, her voice steady. Elias held her gaze. Somewhere outside the network's immediate reach. Somewhere that offers anonymity and freedom of movement. We go where they won't look for a man like me. He didn't wait for her to agree. He simply began issuing rapid, quiet instructions to Caleb. Planes, secure lines, necessary travel documents. Lila watched him, this powerful man who had nearly died protecting her. He had brought her back from oblivion, and now they were going to finish the fight Silas started. The fallout from Silas's betrayal was immediate and brutal. Elias, Lila, and Caleb had to vanish. They left the polished tower in Toronto, taking a discreet flight that landed them far away from the syndicate's main network. A quiet, beautiful coastal town in Northern California. It was the kind of place where people knew their neighbors, and the biggest drama was the price of local coffee. They rented a large, secluded house on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. It was meant to be temporary, a place to coordinate the hunt for Marcus and the stolen drive, but days turned into weeks, and the silence of the coastal town began to wrap around them. The dynamic between the three of them shifted entirely. Caleb handled the logistics, working non-stop in a makeshift study, trying to track any signal from Marcus. He was exhausted but relieved. Silas had always terrified him. Lila and Elias were thrown into close, enforced proximity. She was no longer just his leverage. She was the co-pilot in the operation. They spent hours together tracing the old corruption trail, trying to predict where Marcus would strike next. Slowly, the professional distance Elias maintained began to crumble. He was used to commanding people, not partnering with them. But Lila wasn't just smart, she was resilient. She understood the flow of money, the patterns of evasion far better than they expected, because those patterns were imprinted on her subconscious memories. One evening they were sitting by the huge stone fireplace. The ocean outside was loud and restless. Elias was cleaning a small, serious-looking pistol, a ritual he performed nightly. Lila was reading an old financial report, highlighting a suspicious transfer in the Cayman Islands. Marcus wasn't trying to sell the drive, was he? Lila asked, looking up. Elias stopped cleaning the gun. What makes you say that? The price, Lila explained, tapping the file. The value of this information, names, dates, proof of the burial, is enough to bring down governments. Marcus wouldn't sell it for cash. He was using it to buy something else. What? Immunity, Lila said, meeting his gaze. He was trying to leverage it against the syndicate to ensure his safety. He didn't want to bring down the house. He just wanted a lifetime pass to stay hidden and rich. Elias slowly lowered the gun to the table. He looked at her, and the protective, cold mask he usually wore finally cracked. You see that clearly, he observed, his voice low. You see how people think when they are desperate and cornered. I was cornered for years, Lila replied softly. I know desperation. Marcus wasn't smart enough to be a killer, but he was smart enough to be a survivor. Elias looked at her for a long moment. It wasn't the look of a boss assessing an asset. It was the look of a man seeing another person for the first time. You were meant to be nothing, Elias said, a strange mix of regret and awe in his voice. A ghost, a forgotten witness. Yet here you are, picking apart my structure's secrets. I am what you made me, Lila pointed out. First by paying for my silence, and then by saving me in that elevator. You brought me back to life. The proximity, the shared danger, the sheer intensity of the work. It was forging a powerful, dangerous bond between them. Elias, who had only known calculated loyalty, was discovering something raw and true in Lila. Lila, who had only known fear and betrayal, was finding safety and respect in a man she should despise. Late one night they were on the balcony. The air was cold and salty. Caleb had gone to bed, exhausted. You didn't have to save me, Lila said, watching the waves crash below. When Silas pulled the gun, you could have pushed me toward him, used me as cover, or even just stayed behind the desk. Elias looked out at the dark ocean. The moment I heard the shot, I didn't think about the structure or the rules. I thought about the lie you were living and the truth you were about to remember. I realized I didn't want your story to end there. He turned to face her. My life is built on cold control, Lila. I break rules only when the calculation demands it. But saving you? That was simply instinct. And that instinct is the most dangerous thing I have allowed into my life. He reached out and gently placed his hand on her cheek. His touch was firm yet surprisingly soft. Lila leaned into it, closing her eyes. It was a moment of absolute truth in a world of lies. "This is wrong," Lila whispered, but she made no move to pull away. "I know," Elias murmured. "It destabilizes everything. It makes me predictable." Their growing bond wasn't just a personal matter. It was actively jeopardizing Elias's authority. His people, scattered and hiding, expected their leader to be cold, ruthless, and untouchable. But the longer Elias risked himself for Lila, the more unstable his position became. Loyalty in his world was built on fear, not love. The moment stretched out, full of unspoken fear and fierce, unwanted affection. Suddenly, a loud, insistent buzzing came from inside the house. Caleb's alarm. They rushed inside. Caleb was standing over his computer, his face panicked. "I found him," Caleb breathed, pointing at the screen. "Marcus. He's trying to make a drop." The screen showed a location in downtown Kingston, Jamaica. A specific public drop box. "He's making a desperate play," Caleb explained. "He's planning to upload the drive contents through a public access point in 3 hours. He's doing it in Jamaica because he thinks the local heat will protect him from the network here." "Kingston," Lila whispered, realizing the irony. The place she'd mentioned earlier as a potential safe haven, the place where Marcus had an obscure cousin, was now his final fatal battleground. "If that file drops," Elias said, grabbing his pistol and jacket, his focus instantly back on the mission, "the entire network collapses into chaos, and every major figure in the burial investigation is exposed. We have to stop him." "It's too far," Caleb argued. "It's 3 hours. We can't charter a flight and get there in time. The network will intercept him first if we don't." Elias looked at Lila. Their unspoken bond, the dangerous new emotion, suddenly transformed into a weapon. "We don't need to fly," Lila said, remembering the intimate details she'd been studying. "Marcus didn't steal the drive to use it immediately. He hid it somewhere near the source of his money. The cousin in Jamaica? That was a decoy. He's not physically in Kingston. He's using a remote access link from his real hideout." "Where is his hideout?" Elias pressed. Lila closed her eyes, dredging up the deep memories triggered by the file. The last place he felt truly safe. The place where he kept his original papers. He used to talk about it when he was paranoid. An old lockbox. Near the coast. Not Jamaica. Not Toronto. The Florida Keys. Elias didn't question her memory. He looked at Caleb. "Prepare the fastest transportation route to the Keys. We're moving now." He looked back at Lila, his expression hard. The moment of vulnerability was over, but the connection remained. The risk of their love was clear, but it had just given them the vital piece of information needed to win the war. The race was on. Elias, Lila, and Caleb used every ounce of their resources to get to the Florida Keys. Caleb arranged a private jet and then a high-speed boat, tracking the faint digital trail Marcus was using to route the drive signal from his hideout to the public drop box in Kingston, Jamaica. Lila's memory proved correct. Marcus wasn't in Jamaica. He was in a dilapidated, abandoned fishing shack on a remote key, using a satellite uplink to mask his true location. The setting was a world away from the glass tower, hot, humid, and smelling of salt and decay. When Elias and Lila reached the shack just before dawn, the air was thick and heavy. Caleb stayed back on the boat, managing the digital interception. Inside the shack, Marcus was hunched over a crude table, bathed in the sickly blue glow of his laptop screen. The beat-up conference USB drive was plugged into the port, the upload status bar creeping agonizingly slowly toward 100%. He looked desperate, paranoid, and utterly alone. Elias moved first, silent and efficient. He kicked the shack door inward. Marcus screamed, scrambling away from the laptop. He recognized Elias instantly. "Thorn. I knew you'd come for me. This is my insurance." Elias didn't speak. He just advanced, his pistol steady and aimed. "If you move, the drive drops," Marcus yelled, holding a trembling finger over the enter key. "I send the proof. The whole burial comes out. You and all your dirty contacts go down." Lila stepped out from behind Elias. "It's over, Marcus. You were never in control. You were just Silas's cleanup tool." The name hit Marcus hard. His face, already panicked, went slack with shock. "Silas? What are you talking about? He helped me. He gave me the drive. He told me to leak it if Thorn came for me." He set you up, Lila said, stepping closer. He gave you the drive as bait. He knew Elias would save me and he wanted to be the one to clean up the whole mess, including you, once I was secure. He wasn't your friend, he was the one who diverted the compensation money 5 years ago. Lila pointed to the laptop screen, where the upload progress bar read 98%. The file drops in 60 seconds, Marcus. And when it does, it's not going to save you. It's only going to confirm that you are the last loose witness to the crime Silas committed years ago. Elias isn't the only one who will be hunting you then. Everyone who profited from the original crime will need you dead. Marcus looked from Lila's unwavering gaze to Elias's cold, absolute authority, and the truth finally broke him. He realized he had been played from the very beginning. His insurance wasn't protection, it was a self-destruct mechanism. In a last, desperate move, Marcus lunged forward, grabbing a rusty length of pipe. Elias reacted instantly. The sound of the gunshot was shockingly loud in the confined space. Marcus fell without a word, dropping the pipe. Elias walked over, his eyes fixed on the laptop screen. 99%. Lila moved past him and immediately slammed the laptop shut. The satellite connection was severed just before the file could complete the drop. It stopped, Lila breathed, grabbing the USB drive from the port. It was hot, cheap, and holding the power to ruin the lives of hundreds of powerful people. The immediate crisis was averted, but the silence that followed was heavy with the magnitude of what Elias had just done. He had executed the man who had been his second-in-command for years, Silas indirectly, and the man who had been a low-level asset, Marcus, directly. Back on the boat, as the sun finally rose over the shimmering turquoise water, Caleb looked at the drive Lila held in her hand. The drive is secure, Caleb confirmed, relief washing over him. The immediate threat to the structure is gone. Marcus and Silas are both silent. Elias, you secured the secret. Elias stood at the railing looking out at the sun. He didn't look victorious. He looked completely shattered. It wasn't about the secret, Caleb, Elias said, his voice quiet. It was about the lie. Silas wasn't just a loyal monster. He was a ghost from the original sin. He was the most trusted man in the structure, and he was the one who had been killing us slowly from the inside for 5 years. The drive secured, they returned to the secluded house. Elias ordered the complete, meticulous destruction of the drive and all its contents. But the act of executing his most trusted lieutenant, even indirectly by exposing his plot, had done irreparable damage to Elias's empire. The news of Silas's sudden disappearance, and the subsequent silencing of Marcus sent shockwaves through the syndicate. The foundation of the organization was built on absolute loyalty and impenetrable security. Silas's deep internal betrayal proved that the control was an illusion. The powerful people Elias protected, the politicians, the corrupt bankers, the figures involved in the burial, began to panic. Silas, the right hand of Elias, could be a thief and a murderer who could be trusted. The paranoia and chaos spread through the syndicate like wildfire. Members began to turn on each other, questioning every payment, every order, and every transaction. The structure, meant to be an iron fortress, was buckling under the weight of its own internal distrust. Elias's empire didn't fall because of violence or external police action. It began to fall apart because the one loyal monster, Silas, betrayed the faith of the man who led him. By removing Silas, Elias had saved Lila and the secret, but he had lost the one thing he valued most: control. Lila watched him during those final days in the coastal house. He was still imposing, still commanding, but the cold fire in his eyes was muted. He had won the battle against Marcus and Silas, but he had lost the war against disillusionment. His authority was destabilized beyond repair. "We have the truth now," Lila said to him one afternoon. "The original sin, the theft, the betrayal. It's all exposed." Elias looked at her. "The truth only matters when you can hide it, Lila. Once it's out, it's just chaos. And chaos is a vacuum." "So what do we do with the vacuum?" she asked. Elias looked at her, his expression softening for a moment. He had chosen the emotional truth of protecting her over the ruthless control his position demanded, and that choice had cost him everything. "We leave it," he said simply. "We leave the carcass of the syndicate to feed on itself. They will expose each other and the structure will dismantle itself. It was built on a lie, and the lie has finally been revealed." The fall of Elias's syndicate was slow, quiet, and complete. It didn't happen in a hail of gunfire or a dramatic police raid. It happened with the slow, toxic spread of paranoia. Elias and Caleb orchestrated the final collapse from their remote base in the Keys. They didn't need to release Marcus's digital file. They just needed to leak the rumor that Silas had been a thief and a traitor for 5 years. That small truth was enough to shatter the network. When the powerful figures protected by the syndicate realized that Elias had executed his own lieutenant, the panic set in. They began to question every transaction, every name, and every payment. The network wasn't dismantled by violence. It was dismantled by exposure, turning every member against the other. The very officials who benefited from the burial 5 years ago began turning on their handlers, leading to quiet public disgrace and several high-profile arrests in countries across the globe. It took 3 weeks for the organization to become nothing more than scattered, self-destructing remnants. Elias, the man who built his life on absolute control, had won his freedom by choosing to lose everything. One cool, quiet evening, Lila found Elias packing a small bag in the main living room. Caleb was already gone, having been set up with a new, quiet life funded by Elias's last legitimate assets. Lila leaned against the doorframe watching him. "Caleb will be fine," she said. Elias zipped his bag. "Caleb understands that the greatest protection is invisibility. He earned it." Elias turned to Lila. He was wearing clothes she hadn't seen him in before. Simple, good quality but anonymous. He looked younger, less burdened, yet somehow more exposed. "The structure is finished," Elias stated. "The threat is neutralized. The truth is scattered everywhere. I am no longer Elias Thorne, leader of the syndicate." Lila walked toward him. "Who are you then?" "Just Elias," he replied. "A man who traded an empire for a second chance. My life for the last 20 years has been a calculated lie. I have nothing left to offer you but that." Lila smiled slightly, but there was a deep sadness in her eyes. "You offered me protection when I had none. You risked your life for me when I was worthless to you. You chose emotional truth over ruthless control. That's not nothing." They stood close, the silence between them no longer a wall but a shared space. They had both survived the impossible. Lila had survived being buried by the syndicate. Elias had survived being consumed by it. "Marcus was the reason I was running," Lila said quietly. "But the day I ran into that elevator, it wasn't an escape, was it? It was a call." "We were both called back," Elias confirmed, looking out the window at the ocean. "You were called back to remember the truth that funded your fake life. I was called back to face the consequences of my own control and the betrayal of the man I trusted most." Lila reached out and gently took his hand. It was the hand that held a gun, the hand that ordered silence, but it was also the hand that had knocked her out of the way of a bullet. "The lie of my life is over," Lila said. "The new life I had, the money, the false identity, it was all ruined the minute I ran into that lobby. But the truth you showed me, that is real." "And the lie of my life is over," Elias echoed. "My power was rooted in the organization's existence. Now that it is gone, I am simply a man with a past that is very hard to outrun." They both looked around the large, empty house, the final headquarters of a dismantled empire. They were two people walking away from a wreckage. They didn't have a plan, a safe haven, or a guarantee of tomorrow. They only had the shared knowledge of the truth they had fought so hard to uncover. "Where will you go?" Lila asked him. Elias looked at her, his dark eyes finally showing a quiet intensity that wasn't about power but about choice. "I can go anywhere. I need a place where the sun is constant and the ground is solid." "And what about me?" "You are free, Lila," Elias said. "You have the clean slate you were promised 5 years ago, this time a real one. You can go home. You can go back to Canada. You can go back to the life you wanted." Lila looked at her worn sneakers, then back at Elias, the imposing man who had become her unlikely ally and complicated love. She knew she couldn't go back. The life of quiet anonymity was gone forever. The woman who walked into that elevator to escape her ex was a ghost. The woman who stood here now was a survivor. "The truth is," Lila said, stepping closer to him, "I don't think either of us can ever go back to quiet. We belong to the noise now." Elias didn't smile, but his eyes warmed with a faint hint of hope. He realized that the woman he saved was choosing to stay with the wreckage he created. "Then let's find a new noise," Elias replied, tightening his grip on her hand. They walked out of the house together. They didn't look back at the coastal house or the wreckage of the syndicate they left behind. They knew the elevator didn't save them from the trouble. It called them back to finish what was never ended. The lie that started on the 60th floor was finished, and now 2 survivors were walking away toward an uncertain future, armed only with the truth and the dangerous bond they forged in the shadows. Hope had survived the ruin. We have come to the end of the story. Thank you for watching to the end. Share your opinion about this story in the comments below. I like getting feedback from my audience. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our heartwarming stories.